Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my podcast or my YouTube channel. I'm Will coming out of the multidimensional guide and bleeding channel, and I'm here to help you awaken, heal, and expand your consciousness. And today, in this conversation episode, I had the absolute pleasure to talk to Levi Kreis. And Levi is a very successful recording artist and actor, consciously walking the path of awakening and raising the consciousness of all of those who enjoy and discover his art. Levi's music has been featured in film and television shows, including The Vampire Diaries, Sons of Anarchy, So You Think You Can Dance. He's recorded 9 albums, top 10 positions on various charts, #1 music videos, national tours, TV appearances on The View, David Letterman, James Corden, Jimmy Fallon, and a Tony Award for originating the role of Jerry Lee Lewis in Broadway's $1 Million Quartet. And Levi is also the host of Imagine Paradise, which celebrates and elevates singer and songwriters who are using their art to awaken the consciousness of this planet. I was honored to have been a guest on his podcast as well. And if it's already out, I'll put the link in the description. And in this conversation, we talked about his healing journey through sobriety, his spiritual awakening as an artist, and even his Starseed awakening. So we did talk about 5D consciousness, the Pleiadians, Yeshua, Christ consciousness. It was an amazing, fun, deep conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and leave it in the comments. What has been your biggest takeaway? And if you enjoy this conversation as well, it really helps if you can share it with a friend who you think will benefit from this too. Enjoy the show. Hello, Levi. Thank you so much for being here on the podcast. It's such a pleasure.
Will, thank you
Have-
for having me. I appreciate having conversation with you, and we got to do it on my podcast that's coming
Yeah,
out
yeah.
sometime in
Well,
the near future.
depending on when this comes out, it might be already out, it might be coming out. We'll leave the links in the description to your podcast so that folks can find you. And
Yeah,
yeah, love this. I love this exchange, love connecting with you. And we have more to talk. So one podcast wasn't
yeah,
enough. And today is my turn to ask some questions and get to know a little bit more about your journey. And I want to start with asking you about your artistry and yourself as an artist and how it's been
mhm,
evolving. Because you're a successful artist, you have many albums out, you've done a lot of gigging and experience, and you got your Tony. But I remember last time when we connected, you said something really interested about you just wanting to be more of a, I want to say like a conscious
yeah,
artist, to bring
mhm,
your art as a channel and a tool for the expansion of consciousness, for the awakening of yourself and the collective. So I would like to hear from you. How do you see yourself in your own path as an artist, becoming more
uh-huh,
of, I'm calling it a conscious artist, but what I really mean is an artist that's really in has that intention to really use the art for the collective and really be authentic in your
mhm.
spiritual expression too. How do you see that evolution for yourself, but also for um, the artists, in that you communicate with, that you see
Yeah,
out there, like the collective, but like the artists collective, if that makes sense.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I tell you, I feel like in the last 3 or 4 months, I have been at a crossroads, and that is not without my evolution of understanding, uh, for instance, the expansion of this planet into 5D consciousness. And while I have been doing my own spiritual work, I also began to look at the world around me recently, and also watching videos that you are putting out into the world, and asking myself, well, what if I were to look at the world around me from that 5D perspective? What if my heart was completely open and completely committed to that experience? I know it's an ebb and flow. You and I know that we don't just suddenly arrive and never, and never regress back to, it's a spirit. Our spiritual journey is not a linear journey, right? But at the same time, I begin to ask myself, what's possible in the world for me if I were to begin to evolve out of the duality I was seeing in the entertainment industry, and begin to think, no, ask the universe, I want to see art that is in alignment with my spiritual evolution as well. And the moment that I began to consider how prevalent that duality had become in my life, I had to do some work around that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, in my life, I've been on the road since I was 12 years old. I've known the entertainment community. That's all that I've ever known. And honestly, I have had um, a complicated experience with other artists, other actors, other Broadway actors, where that industry is competitive, it's manipulative, sometimes it's sabotaging, it's petty, it's judgmental, and it's all about, it's the glorification of self. And I didn't grow up with that being my understanding of entertainment. So it was very difficult for me to find a place that I felt that I belong. And so when I talk about duality, I'm trying, I'll make it more specific so I don't sound so vague. It was always a us versus them, a me versus them type of thing, where I am such a fan of art and a fan of people that I oftentimes have come into the room like a big Doberman wagging my tail, just wanting to be friends, and realize that, like, that's not the same value system that the room has when I walk in. And so it began to make me resentful. It began to make me feel isolated and alone. It also, I began to find that I was throwing everybody who was a creative under the bus, because I was just assuming at that point that after many, many years of only seeing, entertainers and actors be that way, I thought, well, everyone's that way. And so I was more and more and more alone. And the more that I isolated myself and hid away, the more this hole inside of me got bigger and bigger, and realized, like, wait a minute, there's something more. And I have to start asking the universe to show it to me. So more recently, I just decided to ask the universe to show me artists that reminded me of what it was like to be a kid growing up in the church. Because when we sang in church, we sang out of conviction. And if you weren't convicted about it, you ain't gonna sing it. And we were singing from a place that was spiritual conviction. And when I discovered that I was not going to have the opportunity to be a gospel artist because of my lifestyle as a gay man, and that's a long, long story, having that major gospel record deal and then being outed and that sort of thing, and the whole industry saying you can't do this anymore. I didn't realize that I lost a piece of myself, because for me, there's an intrinsic connection between music and spirituality, because that's all I knew from the church. So all of a sudden, when the traditional church says, well, we're not going to allow you to do that because you're different, I didn't realize a part of that died for me. And
Mm.
so that hole that I've been missing, that I've been trying to fill with, like, community that wasn't there or whatever, like, it just stayed there until finally, recently, I said to the universe, I said, look, there's got to be a way for me to return to what I know, what I knew as a kid, right? Which is like, I am happiest when I'm using music to heal. What does that mean for me now? And suddenly it was like the veil dropped, and 5D Earth showed up, and all these new cast of characters started walking out of nowhere saying, hey, I'm a conscious artist and this is what I do. And like their music is so cool. And they just want to hang out and they want to like have community. And so I'm like, wait a minute. How wonderful would it be if I re-envisioned my own podcast and with so that I could be of support for every artist who's wanting to use their art to heal, to help expand the consciousness of this planet, to address anything from like generational wounds to community collective conscious wounds of being parts of communities have wounds too, you know, like to just commit to using art to elevate the consciousness of this planet. And so I feel a little bit like a kid right now, like I've discovered something new because I had no idea that it was a legitimate like genre that people people are doing. And so I'm having a blast with this new little discovery of conscious music. And of course, I want to see my future music as well commit to that and return home for
Yeah.
me to what I knew in the beginning. It may not look like traditional religion, traditional gospel, traditional Christianity, but it's reflective of my spiritual journey. And I get to do that. And I should do that. And I think it's going to it's going to fill that void that I've had for years, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good time. It's a good time for me right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also a great inspiration to write, right? To write more music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I feel excited for you, for me, for, for this, for the rise, I call it the rise of the light worker. As you're
Yeah.
sharing this, that's what I'm hearing. Like you're a light worker in your field or in your fields, maybe as an artist or as a spiritual teacher. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be in the field of spirituality or healing or energy healing or anything like that. You can find that light work in your own community, whether you're an artist or you're a doctor. I mean, we need those light workers waking
Hmm.
up and trying to do something different and figuring out, like we said before we start recording, we're figuring things out. We're discovering new ways of doing
Yeah.
things because
Yeah.
it hasn't worked out for us
Yes.
in the past because we were limited in that little box or the
Yeah.
so-called 3D matrix, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
getting out
Yeah.
of that.
I love that you're taking like my particular circumstance and really broadening it out for your listener, right? Because it has nothing, it's not just about music or acting or art, this or that. Like you said just now, wherever we are, in whatever corner of the world, it can be one of my dear friends who goes to her accounting job every day. But having the intention to show up and be a conduit for something that is greater than ourselves, and then be obedient to that spiritual impulse. Uh, when we just show up with that attitude, oftentimes we don't realize that the very thing that we're led to do is the very thing that someone next to us needed to hear.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So it applies to all of us. Just, right? Showing up in life, already wishing that, already envisioning that 5D reality for ourselves, like from a place of giving, right? From a place of heart centeredness, alignment with our purpose,
Yeah.
and a commitment to be a conduit for something that is greater than ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And from a place of receiving too, because I love what you said
Yeah.
about you just said universe, like I'm ready. There's something else. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. Show me the way or show me the opportunities, show me the people, and
Yeah.
they start
Yeah.
coming in, and that's when synchronicities start to happen and you find that artist or you find that thing and you realize that yes, there are people like you, right?
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
it really resonates at a deep level. I there's an artist that I like. I like more of her newer stuff. I've always known her Leanne Rhymes. She's
Hmm.
an amazing singer and she's got a long career, but it's only until recently that I started to listen to her more because she released an album that is, for me, is like super spiritual. She talks even about the Pleiades in one of her songs. And then I'm like, well, she's one of us.
Ah,
Been listening to her. She even has an album that's a chant album with it's just vocals. It's very meditative. I use it in my breathwork sessions. And it's amazing when you start finding those artists with that deeper message and they're just like not afraid of just showing up
mhm.
authentically and writing
Yeah,
about whatever they are
yeah,
feeling, whether they're gonna get a Grammy or not, right?
exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Yes. And I'm immediately going to have to go find this because I've, obviously being from Tennessee, I've known of Leanne Rhymes since I was a kid. So I don't know this album that you're talking about. So I'm really excited to kind of go figure that out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's an amazing singer. I think it's called the one that she talks about the Pleiades is called Spaceship. And she also has a song called Awakening, which is obviously about herself awakening and a collective awakening too. So I
Yes.
love that.
Wow.
And I really commend you too for embracing that journey and just really, showing up as your truest self. And I think that also is very much related to the journey that you commit to be on, like this journey that
Right.
you're walking of healing and awakening and expanding. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that aspect of your journey. When did
Yeah.
you, I know I always say the spiritual awakening comes in waves and we're
Yeah.
always awakening.
Yeah.
It's not like a one
Yeah.
time thing and then you get your badge. Hey, I'm awake.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But
Oh,
I'd love for you to share with us a little bit of your spiritual awakening and your healing journey.
sure. I grew up in the church and I as we would say in the gospel church, I knew by the time I was, 8 years old, singing at a different church every weekend by 12. I was anointed. I knew that when I sang, I was answering a call, that it wasn't about, hey, Ma, this is fun. Look at me. It was, I had to because and I was a very devout kid. I mean, I was, even as a young kid, I would spend, I remember I made a pact with God on a piece of paper as a little kid on September 12th, 1988. I promised God that I would spend 3 hours a day in prayer and reading the Bible every single day. And I could count on one hand the days that I missed up until 1992, August of 92. So that was a good run for me. But that was like me as a kid. I was very much in love with my relationship with God. And without getting too in depth with what is a rather long story, feeling like I was called to be of service through music to God, I secretly checked myself into, in the eighth grade, behind my parents' back, Exodus International, which is a program that's supposed to de-gay kids, right? So I ended up doing 6 years of conversion therapy on my own without my parents knowing. In eighth grade, went to a girlfriend of mine, a friend, a gal pal of mine had another church where they had this available to me. So I started going to her church because I knew that I wanted to be used of God musically. And like I knew that I wouldn't be able to be used of God musically if I had this ugly thing inside of me. So it was very strange. I continued doing gospel music and being obedient to that call. But then when I was in college, I one day was in my 6 year of conversion therapy. Now it's my first year of college, and I'm sitting in my dorm room with the original Greek and Hebrew of these scriptures that are directly or indirectly related to the issue of homosexuality. And my roommate comes in and he says, "What have you been reading so intently for the last 3 months, Levi?" And I just had this moment of trust. And I said, well, I've never told anybody this, but I've been struggling with this since I was all of 8 years old. I've known, and I am beginning to think that God doesn't care. Well, at that time in college, I had signed a huge gospel record deal. Everybody knew it in town. I was very prominent in the Christian organizations, the Christian ensembles, all of the groups, all of the things. I was well in the forefront of the Christian culture of the college and of the town. Well, he went to the board of directors of the college and told them that he had discovered that I was gay. The board of directors of the college then began to deliberate on whether or not to kick me out of college to make an example of me because I'm gay. So ultimately, they did kick me out of my religious affiliated classes, and they allowed me to finish my music classes for that semester. But what happened was an intern at the record label heard that I had been outed on campus to the whole campus, and they dropped me immediately, walked me out of the record label. And at that point forward, the gospel music industry is very clear. I'm no longer an option. Like, this desire I had to make a difference through music growing up as a kid now is over. Done. So I move from Nashville to Los Angeles, and I try to find the things that are going to fill that void. I work my way through 8 other major record labels, and I start finding boyfriends that are physically abusive, and I fall into drug addiction. I survive a gay bashing in Hamilton Park, New Jersey, with a brick to the back of my head. I just end up accumulating all of these experiences that were a simple reflection of this
Trauma.
sustaining self worthlessness that I was just, when you grow up and you're told that you're an abomination to God and that you're detestable in the eyes of God, I really believed in. So my crystal meth addiction drove me down to the ground, to the point where my health was nearly gone. And I had a doctor reach out to me and say, it's do or die. You either have to stop using crystal meth or you're going to lose your health and your immune system is going to be shot and you're over. It's done. It's time for you to do it. And so I didn't have a choice. But in that moment of having to determine if I was going to begin to do this sober thing, I thought of my grandfather. I thought of this man of faith who never raised his voice, who had a daily spiritual practice that he never did not do, that was always loving, that was always an example of someone who was faithful, and albeit traditional Christianity. But just the same, his consistency in his daily spiritual practice told me that I needed to go back and be committed to a daily spiritual practice, whatever that would be, in order for me to somehow get a hold of any sobriety time and get out of something so difficult like getting clean and from crystal meth. It's a difficult thing. So I started meditating, and I started consuming the power of now, and I started finding answers in alternative spirituality, where all of a sudden I was beginning to see a metaphysical interpretation of the scriptures. And I was beginning to understand God as not this outside authority that I must appease, but that within my very DNA, within my very cellular makeup, was an infinite intelligence that was yearning for me to know itself. And that for me, Will, was radical. It was controversial. It was blasphemous to some parts of me, because I just couldn't. I was so indoctrinated that to think that God was an expression, that I was an expression, an extension of the divine, felt like a slap in the face of the old God. Like, how could you, bow to me, worship me, do as I say? Um, but something about it stuck and it made sense. And I kept stepping through the hesitation every time I was a little trepidatious about Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, which seemed so blasphemous to me. I would still read it. I would still do it. And then the power of now. This sounds so crazy, but Eckhart Tolle is doing this. Okay, so meditation. And so I began to find these classes associated with like Centers for Spiritual Living and New Thought, stuff that your audience is probably familiar with. And it began to change. It began to change my perspective in a way where hope started to creep in, right?
Mm.
And while I love my AA groups and I've been in AA and I still go and we keep it anonymous, and that's fine. I just blasted that I'm doing it. That's not anonymous. But the truth is, like, I've always had a problem with the idea that I'm always diseased and I'm always broken
Mhm.
because I know that there's an intelligence within me that only knows to requalify itself to a state of wholeness at all times. And once I began to figure that out, I began to I couldn't stop going down that road anymore. And so many other things began to be aware to me. And so I finally got sober time. I am now 15 years sober, clean and sober. Don't touch a thing. I'm not like an LA sober where like I don't do the coke, but I still drink a lot. I'm like the real sober where we don't do anything. But but the reason that I am is because of what I feel is my own experience rendezvousing every day with this divine intelligence that I find does requalify me to a state of wholeness, and that I am not diseased, and that I am not broken, and that beyond that, there's even other infinite things that have now begun to occur to me. So I can't live without my daily spiritual practice. And if there's a lesson in all of this, rather than me just like pontificating on my own journey, is that I am so insistent that we as a community who know better have a daily spiritual practice. Like
Mhm.
it is so important that we show up for ourselves every single day. And that discipline alone begins to open doorways that would never have occurred to us once we begin to really be committed to showing up for ourselves every single day in meditation, even if it's a simple walking meditation. Oh, I can't quiet my mind long enough to sit there. Walking meditations are great. Oh, I can't, the excuses come, but to show up, will find a way. Spirit will show you your way of how you can sit in that stillness, that silence, and that infinite space, and court the divine within and get to know it, and to not only get to know it, but then eventually to operate from it more and more each day, right?
Embody that divine
Yeah,
energy. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing and congratulations
Sure. Thanks.
for being sober for 15 years.
15 years now. I can't believe it. Yeah,
That's amazing. And
yeah.
I was going to ask exactly when I thought of that question, you answered it. So we're like telepathically communicating.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was going to ask like how was your relationship with God? You know, when you sort of came out of the realization that that God you believed wasn't really the God that you believe now, and that you
Oh,
just believe, but that you feel and that you are,
I know, I
right?
know, I know. It continues to unravel itself, and there are things that I feel like in this safe space on your podcast, Will, I can talk about that perhaps for the audience that I currently now have for my podcast or my music, I don't know. I think it would just sort of like not land, but I mean, I think about how now this old school. Some of your listeners will get this, how now I look at the landscape of monotheism and this traditional religiosity, and all I see are the influence of the Anunnaki. And I see, you know, it's like now I realize that it is part of the fear and the control and the slave
Mm.
planet, that certain dynamics within what is called the Anunnaki from the Sumerian tablets. Yes, it's it, it's left over
Yeah, and
from old
it's
systems that
clear.
are meant to control.
And it's clear to see it now. You even if you don't know it exactly all the stories and all the details, it's just clear. Like you can see
Right.
it, you can feel it. The Pleiadians talk about the God programming that we've been through to
Mm,
believe that it's outside of us and it's something to be worshipped, right? And
yeah.
how that was a plan to keep us in the matrix, right? And
Yeah.
it when you get out of it, when you awaken, you just start it, and there's also an aspect of grief too, because it's like,
Hmm.
well, that God that I believed, or even that Jesus that I believed, and I read in the Bible, not it's not true. Maybe a little bit
Yeah.
of it is true, but
Yeah. Yeah.
also a lot of it has been distorted too, right?
Yes.
Like that
Yes.
story that you read and that you grew up hearing about, it's not really the full story, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
how do you
It's true.
how do you feel about the Christianity aspect? Because you said you grew up as a Christian. How do you feel about the vision of Jesus that was given to you and now versus now?
Well, I feel like Christ could have been a Palladian.
Right.
Right? In a sense that like he was so rebellious against the old traditional systems that surrounded him. And it was a point of contention, obviously, as we know, to the Pharisees and those of who were married to the old way of doing things. And it was never spoken by the words of Christ, any sort of condemning of I mean, like he was a love child, you know? I mean, he really kind of was. And so I find that looking back on the scriptures now, I see a hodgepodge of a lot of influences that are broken up and don't necessarily tell a unified story anymore. You can see sort of more fleshed out versions of things like the flood when you study the Sumerian tablets or the lost books of Enki or you know, you go back hundreds of thousands of years prior to the Bible and you find the same stories are living even then and actually even told to a greater degree than they are in their very abbreviated form in something like the scriptures. Yeah, so it's like it's fascinating to finally have a clarity of that. As far as my opinion about Christianity, though, it's controversial in that I feel like it's all upside down. If you know what I mean, and maybe you can help me articulate it better, but I feel like the 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 gods that I have been told to worship growing up are actually the gods they told me not they warned me about. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Can you help me like say that like their idea of a monotheistic god is actually the entity that's trying to keep us from our godness, and the entity that they have always warned us about is actually the entity that is trying to enlighten us to our own godness. It's all backwards. You know, and I feel like I've been thrown on top, like flipped on my head a little
Yeah.
bit, you know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I also feel like there's a lot of distortion too, like
Yeah.
throughout history. It's like um w- and the thing is when you start questioning the history even or what's in the script, in
Yeah.
the scripture, in the books, in the Bible, that's when you start awakening, and that's not
Hmm.
what they want. So they don't want us to question anything, just
Right.
believe whatever it's there. And I love that you said, um Christ could have been a Pleiadian, because I once got a message that Yeshua was a Pleiadian, and he was sent as part of a plan to seed Christ consciousness. So Christ is the level of consciousness that is of love and
Mhm.
oneness and unity consciousness, which he was all about. He was the embodiment of that Christ consciousness, which is the 5D consciousness that we talk about. And so right now we're awakening to that another dimension, which basically means we're going to be at a level of consciousness that Yeshua or Jesus had when he came here. And he came here to seed the planet with that energy and that love and that
Mhm.
light. And yeah, I also believe that he did have children, and Mary Magdalene was his
Yes.
or
Yeah.
of that, and
Uh,
because also, sexual energy is creative energy, is sacred,
yes.
and they didn't want us to know that either, right? So they
Right. Right.
denied that aspect, even though they couldn't take that out of our DNA. They, programmed us to believe that
Mhm.
this is wrong, and it's only for the procreation of humanity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You just tripped on something that actually, for me in my own particular journey, has been the proof that there has been so much more discovery of love and wholeness in concepts that would have originally been taboo and hidden in the world of Christianity. We grow up thinking that abstinence and shame and guilt and all that sort of stuff is sort of virtue and sort of like this purity. But when you look into more esoteric studies, you begin to be invited to take that power, take that energy, and it's not about abstaining from the flesh. It's about embracing this sexual energy and purifying it so that it isn't lust, so that it isn't ego, so that it is possible to let this be the very thing that fuels and expands our solar astral body and our connectedness to our heart chakra.
Yeah.
They've kept this from us. They've called it lust, they've called it ego. And yes, there's a process. It is a refiner's fire to sit in the middle of that kind of power. And I'm talking about sexual power. And with will, with intention, with patience, and with spiritual guidance, move through it and rid it of lust, rid it of ego, lust and ego, and just let it to be purified. So when it's left, it is this spark of Christhood that like can be transmuted into that very Christ body, or the Christification of our astral body
Right.
through that energy being embraced and cultivated in a pure sense.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we never would have heard that before, but it is proving to be in my life, as I'm now someone who has been really knitted to some of the teachings of like uh Samael oh crap, what is his last name? He talks a lot about um the power of semen retention and the power of transmutation of sex energy into the crystallization of our body, and freeing ourselves of the lower vibrational experiences of what that is. Um, yeah, and for me, as someone who, I was as much of a sex addict as I was a crystal meth addict, and so it is imperative that I understand how to transmute this energy and turn it into the Christification of my astral body rather than allowing it to be low vibrational frequencies. And I think there's something about that, like, to try to bring this right back to your audience, because I want to get too sidetracked, is when we talk about this moving into this 5D consciousness and moving into a place where other expanded realities are starting to occur to us. The gateway to me, and you're going to nod and you're going to expound upon this for me, I hope. It's all about the heart. It's all about thinking from the heart, feeling from the heart, like having the conversation through the heart, because that is the thing I'm tripping on right now. It's like becoming more and more heart centered is the thing. If I want to take a look, defining one thing that would say this is what it's like to start feeling the awakening of your five dimensionality, it would be to be moving through this day to day, heart centered.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There's nothing to expound on it. You just nailed it. Yeah. And you read my mind again, because was what I was going to say. It comes down to the heart. It's something that the Bleeders always say is the heart is the portal, is the bridge.
Yeah,
Heart is the 5D, right? And as a society, as a collective, we've been living basically with our two lower chakras kind of active and
yeah,
wounded even. So that's why, the energy can't come up. It just stays there in a very
yeah,
3D physical space, and it can't move through our Kundalini, right? But once you open your heart and you start whatever it is, your healing journey, your spiritual awakening, your channeling journey, whatever it is, you start working with your heart, and it just keeps
yeah,
expanding and expanding. And it's like inevitable that this clarity will come to you, and new pathways will come to you. You will want to study more and practice more. And so it is about what you said is bringing that energy to the heart, because
mhm,
once it's here, then all of the upper chakras or the higher dimensions will open up.
yeah,
It's not so much about focusing on the spiritual connection more than the heart, because yeah, the heart will is the portal and is the key, is everything. The blade is a
mhm,
multi-dimensional tool. So
yeah.
if it's a multi-dimensional
Wow.
tool, that's what we should be focusing on, right?
Yeah, yeah. To kind of recap for your listeners, I really want to emphasize the importance of a daily spiritual practice and showing up. I really want to emphasize the practice of like from the heart, getting into the heart, placing your attention and your consciousness into the heart. Even if we leave them with two things, I think that those two things alone would be showing up daily in a daily spiritual practice and dropping your consciousness into your heart and allowing that to be your guide already is setting yourself up for success. Right,
Yeah.
right. I think there's but I kind of want to mention that it wasn't until this beginning to be more activated that I began to hear telepathically what's happening. Like it's almost like, you are the one of the few people, by the way, and we could talk about this on your podcast, that I was shared it with, where ultimately in my meditations, and I was getting to feel so in the allness, in that almost predefined nothingness, that other things began to occur to me. And when I began to surrender resistance to things that were unfamiliar to me, long story short, discovering that my soul origin is Palladian from the planet Sterope, but finding my spirit guide is from there too. And then having the ability to telepathically communicate, albeit it's like little fawn legs. It's new to me, but like I feel as though I hear most accurately when I'm listening with my heart. And I would love to have you expand on that, right? Because you you already have such a relationship with that experience. And sometimes I find myself on occasion I doubt what I'm hearing. And then usually if I doubt what I'm hearing, it's because I'm thinking instead of
Mhm.
in the heart, right? Are you able to sort of elaborate on that just for me as a student? Because it's a new it's a new experience for me.
No, I love that you're sharing this because that was actually, I wanted to ask you about your sort of Starseed awakening. So you
Yeah, yeah,
read my mind. Again, love that we're telepathically communicating. And um, it's it's something that I share in my course, Introduction to Channeling, that it really is like a relationship that you develop. Like you
mhm,
meet a buddy and you connect with them, but you're not best friends in 2 minutes, but you resonate with them, and then slowly you just build that relationship, build that
yeah,
trust, communicate better, right? And so it's the same thing. And in the beginning, it might not feel super clear, but it's just the developing of that relationship and really understanding how it works within your system, because it can
mhm,
be very different from person to person. Um, I say, for instance, I love music, obviously, and sometimes my guides communicate with me through lyrics and random songs.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and maybe it was always like that, but I just wasn't attuned to that. And once I
Yeah,
started developing that friendship and that communication with them, I became more attentive to these things and aware of these things, because they will always find the things that really resonate with you to kind of call your attention, right?
right,
And that listening with your heart is really important, but also your mind will still be active and you want it to be active too. But it's almost like you're like amping it up, the heart um volume, and just turning it down the mind a little bit, not to zero, just a little bit,
uh, yeah,
because that your mind will still be active in understanding what you're feeling, asking the questions. And it's very subtle too when you're like, oh, my mind went up and my heart went down a little bit. So it's almost like you're mixing. You understand that because
right, 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 right.
you're a producer and musicians. So it's about balancing, and it will oscillate a little bit. But like you said, if you have that daily practice, it will become more natural. And even when it happens, you're aware of that and you can shift, or you can just really
Yeah,
accept, like, oh, my mind is really loud right now. I'll just connect later, right?
okay. I kind of like that that you just threw that into the mix right there at the end about just simply accepting that there are times that it's just not going to be as clear of a connection, and that's okay. And don't judge it. And my mind's a little busy right now. We'll come back to this, right? It's they know the reality we live in. They
Yeah.
know the struggles we have. It doesn't have to be.
And then
Um,
you next thing you know, you'll be in the shower and you'll hear them, or that
yeah.
insight. You're like, oh, I get it, right? Because
Right. 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 Yeah.
it's true. When you're in the shower, you're in a different brainwave, like you're relaxed. So we go through those different um, waves in our brain too that can help. So you can, like, when you're waking up in the morning, you're in more in a theta state. So that's a really good moment to connect. Um, if your mind is in a beta state brainwave, that's alert. So you're very much in your mind, in your conscious mind. So
Yeah.
it's a wonderful journey of discovering those subtle senses within us.
Yeah.
We're all having them awaken right now. I want to ask, just because I want to be respectful of your time to could talk to you for hours.
Likewise. Likewise. Yeah.
I have a question from my community, the Starseed Grid community. I posted your bio. I said I was going to interview, and I selected a question from them that's especially for
Oh,
them.
fun.
So,
Okay.
um, Tamila from Washington, she's asking about your intuition and your creative process. So, how do you use your intuition to guide you in your creative endeavors? And do you recognize it as a channeling process? And do you ask direction from your spiritual team while songwriting or choosing songs for recording and career direction?
Tamla, I love this question. I'm just closing my eyes to access um, the experience of the experience of writing. I've always asked my spirit guides to guide me in writing songs because it was already a habit from growing up in the church when I would ask God, praying, writing songs by the time I was 12 years old, please give me a message. So it was already baked into my culture, but the fact that it's come into a different meaning, yes, I call it intuition now. And I'm writing a lot of new songs. I'm going to start releasing a new song every 2 months starting in May. And I wrote a batch of these songs last year. And last year was when I began to really have a communication with my spirit guide in a way that we have spoke about before, you and I will, where you begin to hear the articulation of those loving beings just beyond. And the music that I wrote, the next 15 songs, I mean the next 8 singles, was the first time that I felt like it was an absolute divine download and that I was tapped in, hearing and moving through. And that was a life changing experience for me because now, especially considering what you and I've talked about conscious music and really committing to being of service through my art moving forward, the songs that came through me were about my life struggles, they were very autobiographical in nature, and they've set up a conversation for spirituality rather than being a song that offers a spiritual phrase or two as an affirmation. uh, they take you deep into my life experiences and then help from there facilitate healing. But to answer Tamila's question, that experience last year, this time last year, changed the game for me because now I realize that for me, songwriting is going to, from now on, I can access that. I can let it be a divine download. Doesn't mean the whole song comes to me in like an hour, but it means that I feel I didn't write this stuff. And I feel like it's the best stuff that I've written because I didn't write it, because my ego didn't write it, because it didn't really it came from somewhere else.
Who wrote it?
And yeah, yes. And so I'm so excited to share this stuff because I don't know if it's my higher divine self or it is I call them my council of five entities who are always there. They're on stage with me. Sometimes they've whispered lyrics into my ear when I'm about to forget them. They have literally downloaded songs. Sometimes they take me somewhere completely different when I'm live, and I just like am in a song. I call them my council of five, and so yes, it is like a divine download. It is a rendezvous. And now the more that I'm becoming proficient at being able to have that back and forth dialogue, I think I'm going to discover that we are writing songs now, not just me. But I love the thing about intuition too, because even without the expansion of my songwriting experience to include my spirit tribe in their offering of help to me to be useful to other people through my music, I've always been aware of intuition and how to say things in a way that is palatable for everyone, that invites everybody to the table, and it can say it in the way that it's not about my specific journey or my specific pain or struggles or the characters that play a role in my life. But I think I've always had the intuitive nature to be able to say it in a way where you put yourself right in it and you feel it and you experience it and you know it from your perspective what I'm talking about. And I think that's very important in art. I think that's very important in songwriting. I've always just been taught that it's so important as a songwriter to try to be as universal as possible, as invite everybody to the table as much as possible. And so that ethos follows me through talking about spirituality as well, right? Because like the things that I've been able to share with you, Will, are to an audience that I have been talking to would be a little left of center. I think that they would probably, most of them, if they've even heard of the word Palladian, it would have never even considered to them. They're still working on admitting that they're a spiritual being. A lot of people who may be in my world.
Mhm.
It's not a conversation that is comfortable for a lot of people, which is why I'm changing the concept of my podcast to push forward conscious music and like let's normalize this. Let's
Yeah.
let's sit here and be weird about it anymore. Let's talk about spirituality because we're all spiritual beings. And if you were to talk to me about your mental health and going to the gym for your physical health, then by God, it's about GD time we talk about our spiritual health too. You know, like let's fucking go. Let's go. Like let's get over this shit. It's time. Get fired up about it.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a way to talk about even more esoteric concepts in a way that really leaves it salt to the earth and capable of people who can come to the table for the first time and understand it for the first time. So I'm trying to work myself right now in life. I'm trying to wrap myself and wrap that ethos around some pretty fucking esoteric concepts that I think would be new for a lot of people, but I don't think it's something that needs to be confusing or off-putting or weird or uncomfortable for anyone because there's that spark within all of us that if we just have the right wordage or the right experience or the right person talk about it, then all of a sudden it shifts and we're like, oh wow, okay, so we all are a part of the same spiritual community. And yeah, there are a lot of things that I was completely unaware of before going on around me. I now see them. Yeah, so right. So it's like I bring that philosophy of songwriting so much to like spiritual talk. The more that I find myself in more esoteric conversations, because I think we can. I think there's a way to do it that disarms the cynicism and
Yeah.
allows people to see the truth of who we all are in language that may not be familiar to them before, but they know there's something right about it because they feel it on a visceral level, like in their cellular makeup. You
Yeah.
can't help it. You can't help it.
I love it. And I agree with you 100%. And I was thinking, well, for me first, I do think that songwriting is channeling, even when
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
aware of it. It's like, and
yeah, yeah,
I think that there are a lot of people channeling and they don't know. You know,
yeah, 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 yeah,
I was even thinking as you were sharing your thoughts and feelings that even in the mainstream media, there are artists that are channeling that, that wisdom, that light, that love, that power. They might not be aware of it. They might be, but
yeah,
I do think that even in the mainstream artists, they are touching on people's hearts somehow.
yeah,
You
yeah,
think I don't know, Lady Gaga, she could be spiritually awakened and she's just being herself. And maybe her message is all about, accepting yourself and loving yourself. And if you want to
Yeah,
wear whatever you want to wear. And even if people don't have necessarily that deeper realization of spirituality and 5D consciousness, at least they're awakening to something within them that is
yeah.
love and self-acceptance.
Hmm.
And I think that this will be more obvious. I hope that it will be more and more obvious in the future that people will not they will wear the badge. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like they
yeah, yeah,
talk about it, and there won't necessarily be masks or analogies. I mean, there could be analogies because it's a great thing in songwriting, but it's just obvious. It's just as clear and people get it. And if they don't get
yeah.
it, start to open up to it.
Well, listen, this is the time we're living in, and it's like there are people who are having this conversation about 5D consciousness and a five-dimensional Earth, and and discovering like Dolores Cannon and other conversations that even conversations that scientists have been having in a world like people I never would have thought have been having these conversations are having these conversations because we as a planet are accelerating at such a rate that it seems like every month I look around, there's more people who are becoming familiar with concepts that they never would have crossed paths with in their life prior.
Yeah. For sure. There's
We're
definitely
living in a cool time, I think.
it's a mass collective awakening for sure. When you
Yeah.
realize that your mom is talking about the universe, and I'm like, well, there's something shifting, you know. Um, I have some final questions that I call them
Yeah.
fun and deep questions. So I suggest that you just don't overthink and whatever comes to your mind,
Okay.
you answer.
Okay.
So what is your definition of art?
My definition of art is a means by which to express the human experience in a better way than words.
Love it. And what brings you joy, Levi?
Hmm. My daily spiritual practice, integrity within myself. Oh, I have to say, so many people who have struggled with addictions, you know, when you're struggling with addiction, you're also struggling with being honest and not being a liar and not living in the shadows and not hiding your addictions
Mhm.
and creating a reality of yourself for everyone else to believe it's not true. And because of that journey for me, I have grown so in love with being so transparent and so within my own integrity that it almost makes me want to cry when I think about it, that it's not complicated inside of here anymore because I'm being true to what I want for me on the higher self and staying consistent in character with with who I want to be and what I'm doing day to day to do it in my daily spiritual practice. It feels so peaceful. It feels so peaceful that I maybe that's my greatest joy actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's sovereignty too, right?
It
Being.
is. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
All right. So this next question, I usually do it with books, but I'll do it with albums with you. So
Oof.
imagine that all of the albums in the world were going to be destroyed and deleted forever, and you can say
No.
which one would you say?
Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder.
That's one. Maybe his greatest hits.
I gotta say, we mentioned it earlier in our conversation prior to this, but like Get It Right, Aretha Franklin, that album gives me life.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to go off the grid for a minute to mention somebody who, like, I don't know a lot of people are going to know, and that's a Christian artist by the name of Margaret Becker, who has an album called Immigrant's Daughter. And she has songs called The Hunger Stays, for instance, which is a song about her undying thirst to know spirit and to have a relationship with spirit. It is the most earnest song on an album that is so humble and heartfelt. And I think that in her journey as an artist who was discovering herself and battling a lot of things on her own too in the light of Christianity, it shows. And the honesty in that album is, I mean, anytime I'm ever come, like before I do any sort of ritual or any sort of medicine, it's like I'm always listening to that album to remind me of just how to be humbly available to spirit in a way that just says, use me, use me however you see fit. I want to be of service to something that is greater than myself. And I love that. So Margaret Becker, Immigrant's Daughter, beautiful album.
Yeah, yeah, I'll look that up because I don't know. And we were also talking earlier, Luther Vandross too. If
Oh
he
yeah, oh
was to
yeah.
name one of her songs in the album would be great,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. Never too much, never too much, never too much. Yeah,
Love it.
so good, so
Um,
good.
what would be one thing that people would be surprised to know about you?
Then I'm a Palladian, Starseed.
Secret is out.
Secret's out.
Love it. Um, and this last question I borrowed from Lewis Howe's podcast is called Three Truths. So
Oh,
imagine that many years from now, you're about to transition from this physical realm into the spiritual realm, and
uh-huh.
you have all of your albums and podcasts and books, everything you've done will be deleted, and you have a piece of paper in front of you, a pen, and you can write three truths that you learned from this experience, and that's going to live on for your family and audience and the earth. What would be your three truths?
He was a truth seeker. He only wanted to be of service, and he got the fucking joke.
Love it. Love it. Tell us how people can connect with you. What's the best way?
Oh,
If
the
there's
best way.
any
My
project.
website is a wealth of education. I have placed, I'm working on flushing out. Oh, like what are you talking about? 15 years now of music history and content of television shows, appearances, radio, magazine covers, art, all kinds of stuff. A beautiful archive now that's available to everyone on my website. Tour blogs, if you ever want to know the juicy details behind the scene of any sort of shows that I'm doing. The tour blog is on the website. My website's a great place to get to know me because there's just a lot of unique experiences available to everyone. So that's levikreis.com, Kreis. It's easy. If you think German, you'll know how to spell it. levikreis.com. And I would rather have you there than any of my socials.
Yeah, and you also have your community too, right? In your website.
I do, I do. They're called the LK Crew. And in addition to, it's sort of like my Patreon in a way, right? They get tons of exclusive content. I mean, there's over 100 plus unreleased songs, over 70 plus behind the scenes videos, live concerts, many full live concerts, movies, musicals that I've done. I mean, there's a studio blog where you follow me into the recording studio and you get to see firsthand, real time, all the songs that are coming out of me. I mean, I'm really good to my members because they're good to me. I've always considered them my record label. They are the reason that I get to do music, and I am devoted to them. And so they're called the LK Crew, and I get to know them personally too. It's like a really cool relationship. It's a great community, and they get to know each other too. I think recently we just had a love connection in the LK crew, which is kind of fun.
Amazing. The power of
Yeah,
community, which is all about the 5D consciousness, Age of Aquarius.
yeah.
And any projects in the pipeline? Or you mentioned you're writing a new album. Do you know when it's coming out?
Yes. Well, first of all, I met this YouTuber who has a lot of really interesting content about the Palladian Collective and 5D consciousness and all. So his name's Will Caminada, and he'll be joining me on a relaunch of my podcast called Imagine Paradise Podcast, and it'll be coming out around about mid-May. Like once we hit a little spring equinox, we'll release it. But I will start having a new single every 2 months starting in the spring as well. May 17th will be that first single. And if you want to follow my Instagram at Levi Kreis, I will be rolling out supportive content for that. And we're just going to keep the music going. We're going to, now that I'm producing my own music and I'm in control, it's a little scary learning a new skill like that in public. But I'm ready now to start like throwing the music out there and being like, if it's not, it's not major label perfect. Well, I'm doing it though, and it's going to get better every single time. And it's going to be a fun ride. I mean, it feels like starting my music career all over again. And so
Yeah,
I'm really excited about that.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. I'm excited to looking forward to listening to your singles. And for anybody listening or watching, you've got an extensive discography too on Spotify. Go
Yeah.
listen to Levi's albums. I listened to one yesterday, which has the same name of your podcast. It's Imagine Paradise.
Imagine paradise.
Amazing.
Because paradise is yours to the degree that you can imagine it is the reason I wanted to name that album. It was the first moment. I think I was listening to a lot of Neville Goddard at the time, but it fits right into what we're talking about. When we wake up in the morning, do we want to see the 5D new earth around us that day? Can we envision that? Can we allow ourselves to be open and available to imagine what that would feel like, that paradise? And I just really believe that paradise is yours to the degree that you can imagine it. It's there.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing that sometimes you write something and you go back to it and it has like a deeper layer even
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
your consciousness is expanded and then the thing you wrote 5 years ago has a different meaning and you're like, wow,
yeah,
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 that's channeling.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Levi, thank you so much. And I want to acknowledge you for your commitment to your artistry and to your authenticity and to your healing journey. Um,
Mhm.
you're really inspiring, and just you by being your most authentic self and shining your light and being excited about creating your music and inspiring others as well is just very contagious. And I just, yeah, I'm just grateful for your
Uh,
being. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on, and it's great to talk to you again. Have me on anytime. I'm more than willing to.
Yeah, yeah, let's do this more times. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. If you would like to learn more about Levi's work and listen to his music and watch his videos and listen to his podcast as well, you can visit his website. It's www.levikreis, that's KREIS.com. Follow him on Instagram as well, Levi Kreis, and connect with him, leave a message, tell us what you think of this interview, what has resonated the most with you, and maybe what's been your biggest takeaway from this wonderful conversation. And as usual, you can find all the links in the description. And once again, if this has brought you value, please subscribe to my channel, my podcast, and share it with that one or two friends that will love to listen to this conversation too. As always, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode. Bye.